They were always just a whisper. Every species in the galaxy, no matter how far-flung or newly evolved, knew the stories. No one claimed to have seen them. No one claimed to have ever truly known what they were. They didn't even go by a name anymore. Just a warning. Don't wake the humans. No one knew what they looked like. No archives, no visuals, no confirmed genetic samples. Just tales passed down in hidden codes and encrypted language. Children were told bedtime stories about what might happen if someone, anyone, made the mistake of stumbling into their territory. Not that anyone knew where their territory began. It wasn't mapped. It wasn't claimed. It just was. And for 100,000 years, that was enough. Until someone got curious. His name was Commander Thorin, a Brakari war tactician known for breaking rules and rewriting military history with a trail of victories soaked in arrogance. He wasn't scared of bedtime stories. He didn't believe in ancient warnings from dead civilizations. He believed in data, numbers, and blood. Thorin led the 12th Recon Armada, a fleet big enough to crack a planet in half. They were chasing rumors, a signal burst that had pulsed through 3 quadrants, repeating one word in a long, dead language. Awaken. At first, no one on the council cared. Bursts like that happened, old tech screaming into the void. But Thorin, he couldn't let it go. That signal had something human in it, a rhythm, a heartbeat, something primal. His own neural net couldn't explain why it echoed in his spine, but it did. Against orders, he went dark, took his fleet beyond the last mapped sector. No comms, no trackers, just silence. He wanted to see what everyone else was too scared to believe. They called it Sector Zero. No stars, no gravity, no light. Just black space, dead space. No reason for it to exist, but something was there. A mass so dense it pulled their dreadnoughts sideways, even before they entered orbit. When they finally dropped into range, they didn't see a planet. They saw a construct. Metal, stone, flesh, miles across, breathing, beating, covered in structures too large to comprehend and too damaged to identify. It looked like a civilization had been buried alive and kept twitching. Thorin ordered a landing. His crew hesitated. Some refused outright. One of the captains tried to trigger a fail-safe self-destruct. Thorin shot him in the head on the deck. They landed anyway. And that's when it started. Not a sound. Not a welcome. No defense grid. No attack. Nothing but silence, like the place was waiting. The deeper they went, the more wrong it felt. There were murals, walls of carvings showing creatures like nothing they'd ever seen. Tall, lean, eyes like empty sockets, bodies designed for war, for endurance, for pain. One mural showed thousands of other alien races kneeling, another showed the sky burning, and another, the last one showed the humans being put to sleep, not defeated, not killed, not exiled, just locked away. The translation team cracked only a few words from the ancient tongue, burned into the stone in blood-colored ink. If they wake, the galaxy ends. Thorin didn't believe it. He should have. They found the chamber a day later. It was buried beneath a vault made of layered neutronium and compressed singularities. The kind of lock no species could build anymore. It hummed with energy, pulsed like a living thing. And it had a console, just one, a single glowing red key, one word blinking softly in every language ever known. Open? Thorin didn't hesitate. He pressed it. The vault opened like a dying star, slow, grinding, shrieking across every frequency their ears and sensors could detect. Not a hiss, not a pop, not some holy burst of light, just sound. Pure, vibrating, bone-rattling sound. The crew of the Tyrannox fell to their knees as the pressure hit them. Not gravitational, existential. like the laws of the universe around them had paused just to watch what came next. Thorin stood firm. Barely. His face was bloodless, his jaw clenched like iron. But he didn't flinch. He couldn't. His pride, his name, his damn legend was built on not blinking. Inside the chamber, it was dark. At first. Then something moved, not fast, not threatening, just enough to let them know they were no longer alone. A shape emerged. Not a beast, not a god, not even a man, just a body, lying on a slab made of obsidian glass. Human. Unmistakably human. Pale skin. Muscular structure denser than steel. Worn tech fused into the spine and limbs. Not armor. Integrated evolution. Sleeper tech that hadn't been seen in over 100 millennia. His eyes were shut, but the body was breathing. Deep calm. Timed like a weapon waiting for a target. No age, no decay. He could have been 30, could have been 3,000. But he was alive. Thorin stepped forward. He ignored the trembling whispers on the comms. Ignored his XO, who was muttering prayers to gods he didn't believe in. Ignored the bioscan alarms, warning of a Class Omega neural pulse. He reached out his hand, touched the slab. The man opened his eyes. It wasn't dramatic. No lightning. No scream. Just eyes opening like someone waking from a nap on a quiet afternoon. But the moment they locked on Thorin, it was like a sledgehammer slammed through time itself. Black eyes, not darkness, not metaphor, just black. As if they weren't eyes at all, but holes. Holes in the shape of sight. Then came the whisper. Not out loud, not over comms, not through any device. Inside them. A voice in every brain in the room, in a language no one spoke, yet understood. Which one of you did it? The crew collapsed, bleeding from the ears. Some began convulsing, others screamed and tore at their own faces. Not out of fear, out of shame. Deep, soul-cutting shame that didn't belong to them. Thorin held his ground again. Barely. He clenched his fist. "What are you?" he asked. The human sat up. Not rushed, not hesitant, just like it was his room. He looked at the others. Most of them were either dead or mentally broken already. All it took was a glance. The human stood, 7 feet tall, muscles like coiled metal, skin covered in faint lines, not tattoos, not scars. Something older. The kind of marks that meant something when languages were still young. "I am the last lock," he said, this time out loud. His voice was deep, clear, sharp enough to cut silence in half. Thorin raised his weapon, but even he knew it was useless. The human didn't flinch. He looked at the weapon like it was a child's toy. Then, calmly, he walked toward the edge of the chamber, where the wall had been, except now it was gone. Because everything was gone, the construct had begun to peel, not collapse, not fall apart, but open, layer by layer, revealing more chambers, more slabs, more humans, thousands, all of them asleep, all of them breathing, all of them waiting. "You fools," the first human whispered. Not in anger, in pity. Thorin couldn't speak. His throat was locked. But inside his head, the voice returned. "They feared us, not for what we did, but for what we were willing to do. They begged us to stop. And when we didn't, they buried us." Thorin forced out the only word that mattered. "Why?" The human turned. And for a moment, Thorin saw it, a flicker of grief behind those black eyes, just a spark. Gone in a blink. "Because we don't lose." Then the signal went out. Not a pulse, not a transmission. Something older, primal, like a scream from the bones of reality. Every relay, every ship, every species across the galaxy felt it. And for the first time in 100,000 years, they remembered. Not who the humans were, what they were. They weren't warriors, they weren't conquerors. They were the response, the reaction, the consequence of a universe that tried too hard to control everything and finally created something it couldn't. Across the stars, panic spread like a virus. On Vrexia Prime, the ruling caste detonated their own sun. On the moon of Cathul, the Orican priests tore down their own temples in blind terror, screaming forgotten names. On the DeLorean spiral, a ceasefire that had held for 3,000 years shattered in a heartbeat, not out of politics, but fear, because the humans were awake. And the universe had just remembered what it cost to put them back to sleep last time. Back in the chamber, Thorin fell to his knees. Not from fear, from awe. He knew what he'd done. He didn't regret it. He wanted to see. "Will you kill us?" he asked. The human didn't answer. Instead, he stepped onto the chamber floor. He walked through the corpses, the broken minds, the twisted steel. He reached out and pressed his hand against the next slab. And it opened. Another human. A woman. Cold. Silent. Eyes blacker than space. She opened her mouth and sang. No melody, just vibration. Outside, ships began to fail. Lights died. Systems rebooted in alien languages. Gravity reversed. Space itself warped in pulses, like it was breathing with them. The rest of the humans were waking up. Thorin smiled, blood dripping from his nose. "Beautiful," he whispered. Then his heart stopped. Not from attack, not from violence, just turned off. The first human looked down at him as he died. And for a second, 1 second, his eyes weren't black. They were human, blue, sad, and full of history. For 6,000 years, the Archeon Coalition had ruled the central systems. They were the oldest, the most advanced. Their laws carved the flow of trade, politics, even war itself. When they spoke, the rest of the galaxy listened. And when they heard what had happened in Sector 0, the High Assembly did what they always did. They gathered. 9 warlords, 6 high arbiters, 3 ancient beings who hadn't moved in centuries. They assembled in silence aboard the Spire of Logic, orbiting the cradle planet of Ishtan. None of them had seen a human. None had lived during the Black War. But the fear was real. Buried in data vaults. Scrawled in corrupted language files, still echoing in the subconscious of species that couldn't even remember why they dreamed of screaming faces. Now, it wasn't a dream anymore. The humans were awake. "Send a fleet," said Grand Marshal Koreth. "Burn the system to ash before they regain their numbers." "It won't matter," hissed Yilstrak, one of the Mind Weavers. "They're awake. They'll spread. They're like fire in a vacuum. Nothing stops it once it catches." "Even fire needs fuel," Koreth snapped. "We starve them, starve their growth, deny them resources, isolate the system." The archivist, old beyond reckoning, raised one skeletal digit. "We tried all that once." Silence fell. She whispered, "And we still lost." Across the void, 100 light-years from that council, humanity's awakening moved like rot under skin. Quiet at first, but unstoppable. One by one, more slabs opened. Each one releasing a being that had no name, no origin in modern records. No one knew where humans came from. No one wanted to remember. Because the truth was simple. Humanity didn't evolve in peace. They weren't shaped by harmony. They were forged in agony, in starvation, in betrayal, and blood. And that kind of evolution leaves scars deeper than memory. On the deck of the derelict Tyrannox, the remaining crew were long dead or brain-wiped. The humans stepped over their bodies like ants stepping over pebbles. No cruelty, no interest, just indifference. They were focused, focused on the stars. Each one had some kind of link. You could see it in the way they moved, like dancers in a war march. No commands, no shouting, just action. They moved together, flowed together, as if their minds were running parallel but separate. They were organizing, preparing. The woman who had sung, they began to call her the Frequency. She spoke only in pulses. Her song shifted matter, corrupted software, bent light. With every note, derelict systems came to life. Alien machines bent to her will. Gravity changed its rules. The first human, the one Thorin had awoken, was called the Prime. He didn't speak much, didn't need to. He only pointed. And when he pointed, things happened. On the edge of the system, a patrol vessel from the Xylari Dominion made contact. They were peaceful, curious creatures, more explorers than soldiers. But they followed orders, and the orders were clear. Observe the awakened zone. Document any aggression. They never returned. The footage recovered later showed the humans doing nothing, not even noticing the ship. Yet the vessel melted, not exploded, melted, from the inside out. No weapons fired, no defenses raised, no interaction detected, just molecular collapse, instant. Like the universe had blinked and decided that particular ship didn't need to exist anymore. That was the first incident. Then came the second, and the third, and by the seventh, entire fleets were disintegrating without a shot fired. The humans weren't attacking. They weren't invading. They were simply existing, and the universe couldn't survive it. Inside the spire of logic, panic turned to desperation. "Deploy the Obsidian protocols," one shouted. "They'll retaliate. They're already retaliating." No one knew what the Obsidian protocols even were anymore. Just a rumor of weapons never meant to be used. Fallback plans created when the galaxy still had blood on its hands from the first time they fought humanity. 3 dreadnoughts were sent, heavily shielded, AI-controlled, FTL enhanced. Every weapon pointed at Sector 0. They made it, for 6 seconds. Then their signals vanished. No explosion, no debris, no distortion. Just silence. A deeper silence than space usually allowed. In the command center of the Prime's new structure, grown from repurposed alien tech and old human architecture, a conversation was happening. "You feel them watching?" one of the humans asked. The Prime didn't answer. The man who spoke, younger-looking, bulkier, cracked his knuckles. "They'll try again." The Frequency was humming now, pacing. Each hum disrupted time around her feet, leaving micro-fractures in the stone. "They don't remember," she said softly. "They will," Prime replied. His voice was calm. Too calm. "They'll run," said the younger one. "They always run. They'll fight first." Prime looked out at the stars. "Let them." Across the galaxy, evacuation orders began. Worlds closer to Sector 0 were abandoned entirely. Border systems went dark. Trade routes collapsed. Alliances crumbled. Empires turned inward. Leaders hiding in bunkers built for doomsday scenarios. On the industrial world of Zerath 9, the factory lords detonated their core to deny the humans any material. On Grellic, the ruling theocrats sacrificed half their population to power a forbidden weapon, the Null Sphere. They fired it into the void. The sphere traveled at impossible speeds, warping dimensions behind it, and it hit its mark. In Sector 0, it slammed into the human structure with enough force to vaporize a moon. Except, it didn't. It stopped. Mid-air. Frozen. Then, slowly, the sphere folded in on itself, not exploded, not destroyed, folded like paper, each layer collapsing inward, defying physics until it was a pinprick, and then gone. The humans didn't even acknowledge it. The message was clear. They weren't going to fight you. They didn't need to. They were the consequence, the reckoning. And you had woken them up. In a deep cell buried on the dead world of Velshan, a creature long forgotten began to stir. He was older than most stars. Covered in chains made of thought and memory, a being the galaxy had hidden long ago. He felt it, the rhythm, the song, and he smiled. "So, they live," he whispered. "Good." His laughter cracked the stone walls around him. In the ruins of Tyrannox's wreckage, the Prime stood above the slab where Thorin had died. He looked down at the man who had awakened him, and for the first time, he knelt. Not in respect, not in mourning, in recognition. "You were the first," he said quietly. "You broke the seal." He placed a finger to the dead man's chest, and Thorin's heart began to beat again. His eyes shot open, gasping, choking, body spasming. The Prime leaned in close. "Now you get to watch what comes next." And with that, Thorin's body was pulled into the slab, fused into the construct, alive, conscious, trapped, a witness, a record keeper. The galaxy would remember, because he would remember for them. And the humans, they kept waking, one by one, each one worse than the last. Some smiled, some cried, one just screamed until time fractured around her. But none of them spoke of peace, because peace was never the goal. Peace had failed. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to balance the scales. They called it Operation Final Eclipse. A coalition strike, a desperate throw of everything the galaxy had left with teeth. 500 warships, thousands of drones. Planet-killer payloads, fold cannons, gravity knives, mass core detonators, weapons designed to end wars before they started. The mission was simple. Penetrate Sector 0, kill everything that called itself human. Seal the gate, delete the error. Leading the assault was Fleet General Bran Vox, a 3-century war veteran engineered for battlefield adaptation and zero-empathy tactical logic. He wasn't bred for mercy. He wasn't built for second chances. He was a hammer. And Sector 0 was a nail. His flagship, the Iron Promise, entered slipspace first. The others followed behind, a rippling army of fire and steel. Behind them, entire species held their breath, praying, begging, sacrificing anything to stop what had already begun. Across the command deck, Bran's second-in-command leaned in. "We have visual in 5 minutes. Ready the first volley," Bran ordered. His voice was dead, not emotionless. Dead. The feed lit up. Sector 0 bloomed in front of them. A cold system. No suns, no light, just shadows cast by things that shouldn't exist. The human structure was massive now, stretching across moons, linking asteroids with bridges of living alloy. Towers grew from the void like thorns from a corpse, and they were still growing. "Target lock?" Bran asked. "Confirmed, but—" The officer hesitated. "But what?" "There's no heat signature, no defense grid, no shielding, no targeting systems. It's empty." Bran's eyes narrowed. "Then we'll crush them in their sleep." He raised his hand. "Fire!" The fleet launched every weapon it had. The void lit up like a second Big Bang. Explosions rippled across reality. Black hole cores detonating mid-flight. Neutron beams carving through space. AI-driven ordnance swarming like mechanized locusts. Every system showed direct hits. They hit. And yet, nothing. No reaction, no counter, no explosion, no debris. The missiles disappeared. The beams vanished. The drones lost contact. Gone. Erased, like they never existed. Bran's face didn't change, but his knuckles turned white. "Scan again." "We're scanning," the comms officer's voice cracked. "There's nothing to scan. The whole sector's rewriting itself." "Impossible." "No, General. It's rewriting physics." On the edge of the fleet, A destroyer-class battleship named the Veilbreaker screamed across comms. "Something's on our hull!" "It's crawling through the metal." "What?" "No heat signature, no mass, no life signs." Then silence. The Veilbreaker folded inward, hull first, then bridge, then light, until all that remained was a black stain in space. Not a ship, not even wreckage, just a memory that something used to be there. Then came the first human. Floating, no suit, no armor, no thrusters, just skin, eyes, and gravity-bent rage. He hovered before the Iron Promises bridge, staring through reinforced titanium. Through one-way crystal glass, through every shield Bran's ship had. And he smiled. Bran stared back. "Fire all forward cannons." They fired. The man didn't move. The cannons didn't hit. The rounds slowed mid-space, paused, then reversed, slamming back into the Iron Promises front with twice the force. The bridge cracked. Alarms screamed. The crew was thrown against walls, consoles, blood mixing with sparks and screams. And still the human floated, unbothered, calm. Then he whispered. Just one word. "Remember." The word echoed in Bran's skull like an old wound being ripped open. He saw images, faces, flames, hands reaching for mercy and finding none, worlds burning, skies black with smoke, creatures on their knees. He saw himself. No, not himself. A human, but somehow, him. And then it was gone. Bran gasped, collapsed to his knees. Behind him, the officers scrambled. "We have multiple incoming. They're just appearing. No warp signatures. No drive emissions." The void filled with human forms. Hundreds, thousands, walking through nothing, crawling from the edges of sight. Every one of them different. Some massive, others skeletal, some carrying weapons made of light and thought. And not one ship, not one vehicle, just humans, unarmored, unstoppable. The fleet opened fire, torpedoes, lasers, fold bombs. Nothing landed. Every shot was eaten by space itself. Then the humans answered. Not with weapons, with will. Ships began imploding, not from the outside, from inside their own logic. Systems turned on themselves. AI went mad, screaming in languages never coded. One ship fired on its neighbor, another activated self-destruct. One cruiser simply blinked out of the fleet, reappearing in the heart of a gas giant. And through it all, the humans didn't attack. They just walked, watched, judged. Bran tried to retreat, ordered a slip jump. His drive refused. "General, the ship's AI is unresponsive." "I am the AI now," came a voice. It wasn't a machine voice. It was her. The frequency. She stood in the center of the bridge, somehow inside the ship without breaching it. Her body shimmered like liquid steel, her eyes twin eclipses. She sang one note. Bran's command crew dropped dead instantly. Brains melted. He stood. Somehow. "Why?" he whispered. "Why are you doing this?" She tilted her head. "Because you wouldn't leave us alone. I didn't wake you. But you followed. You always follow." Bran tried to draw his sidearm, but his hand was gone. Not cut, not burned, just missing, like he never had one. The frequency stepped close. Her voice was softer now. "You thought we were monsters. You made stories, but it wasn't fear that buried us. It was envy. You built an empire on the bones of what you didn't understand. You thought killing us meant you won. It only meant you delayed the cost." She touched his chest. Bran collapsed. But she didn't kill him. Instead, the frequency whispered something only he could hear. And he screamed. Outside, the rest of the fleet was gone. Vaporized? No, rewritten. Twisted into structures, into chains, into architecture. The metal fused with the bones of dead crew. ships bent into new forms, not machines, but monuments, monuments to failure. The Prime stepped forward, walking through the ruins. "They thought they were sending weapons," he said aloud, to no one. "They sent witnesses." The frequency stood beside him. "They'll send more. Let them. Should we respond?" The Prime looked out at the stars, and finally he smiled. "Not yet. Let them remember first." Across the galaxy, the silence was worse than the news. No footage made it back, no survivors, no signals, but every species felt it. A silence that tasted like failure, like guilt, like the past was finally crawling out of its grave. On Ishtan, the spire of logic was empty now. The assembly had fled. On Grellan 3, the children of the coil mass suicided, rather than face what was coming. On the trading moon of Kelvin's Reach, every screen lit up with one phrase, broadcast in every language. "They are not coming. They are already here." The broadcast came in the dead of night cycle. Every planet, station, mining rig, religious temple, and pirate den. Every frequency, every wavelength, every language. It hit like thunder and whispered like regret. A voice, old, male, breaking. "This is Archseer Kareth of the Veldari Ascendancy, to the ones we once called human. We beg you. He paused. Shaky breath. Ash on his lips. He looked off camera, as if someone stood behind him holding a knife made of memory. "We remember what we did. We were there, some of us. Our ancestors, our fathers, our hands. We stood on the broken bones of your worlds and called it peace. We celebrated when your last fleet fell. We called it the Great Silence. But now, we understand. You didn't lose. You just stopped talking." His eyes shimmered, not from light, from fear. "Please, let us fix it. Tell us what you want, anything. A planet, 10, our armies, our blood. Just don't end us." In Sector 0, the frequency watched the feed play on a warped projection spun from salvaged stars. The Prime didn't even look at it. "They still think we want something," he said. "They don't understand," whispered the frequency. "No, they never did." Behind them, more humans emerged from the construct, hundreds per day now. Some had eyes like mirrors, others had no faces at all. Some walked through walls. One man burst into flames every 10 seconds, died screaming, and was reborn from ash again and again. Each was unique. Each was broken in their own way. Each was awake. And none of them spoke of peace. The Prime paced the central hall, walls made of enemy ships, woven into veins of ancient technology that pulsed with life. He was restless now, breathing deeper, shoulders tighter. For the first time since he woke. He was angry, not at the broadcasts, not at the begging, but at the silence inside him, where there should have been something, rage, purpose, direction. There was only cold. They hadn't woken up with a plan. They just woke. And now the galaxy wanted reasons, as if reasons were ever offered when they were hunted down like vermin and erased, as if justice was a two-way concept. The frequency turned to him. "They'll send emissaries next. Let them. Should we receive them?" The Prime paused. "No." Still they came. 3 ships, white flags, unarmed, diplomatic vessels bearing ancient symbols of surrender, each crewed by peace officers, historians, linguists, psych empaths, none of them soldiers. They docked with the outskirts of the construct, and were met with silence. No doors opened, no lights guided them, no air greeted them, but they stepped out anyway. It wasn't bravery, it was desperation. One of them, a reptilian creature with gray eyes, carried a box. Inside was a bone. Human. Preserved. He knelt, opened the box. "We brought this back. It was stolen. It belongs to one of you." Nothing happened. He placed it on the black stone and bowed. Behind him, a diplomat read from an ancient human dialect. "We offer repentance, blood for blood. Name your demand." The Prime watched from a high perch, far above, unseen. He didn't descend. Instead, he nodded once to the frequency. She sang. One note. The ground cracked beneath the diplomats. Not enough to harm them, just enough to make them know, "We see you, we hear you, we still remember." Then the bone turned to ash, and the ash blew back into the diplomat's face. The message was clear. "You can't return what you stole. It's not yours anymore." They left, quietly broken, not attacked, but refused. On the capital world of Sithar, the Tri-Council of Nations met for the first time in 2,000 years. War generals, empresses, planetary kings, all gathering in a circle with no walls, exposed to the stars, as tradition demanded. The question was no longer, "What should we do?" The question was, "What will they do next?" "Maybe they don't want revenge," one elder said. "Maybe they just want to exist." "They can't," replied another. "Their existence is incompatible with everything else. They unmake order." "They haven't attacked." "They haven't had to." Then came the voice, from behind them, from inside their circle. A man, human, young, wearing no armor, just skin, dirt, and the look of someone who'd died long ago and got back up out of spite. He smiled. "Is this the part where you vote?" Guards moved. Blasters raised. He didn't move, didn't even blink. "You're making this too easy," he said, stepping forward. "You still think this is a war." "Isn't it?" barked the Supreme Commander. "No," the man whispered. "This is an obituary. You're not fighting for survival. You're just deciding how long you want the funeral to last." "Then tell us what you want." He grinned. "We want you to know." Then he collapsed, dead. Gone. Body gone cold. A messenger. One way. Already spent. In the deepest vault on Korivar, the last functioning galactic archive opened a sealed file encoded in the dying days of the first human war. The file had a name. The Threshold Directive. Only one sentence was visible. "If they ever wake, do not resist. Run, hide, and pray they forget you." The file deleted itself. And the Prime sat in the Hall of Roots, a chamber grown from bone, steel, and memory. Light bent strangely here. Time moved slower. He stared at a map of the galaxy, not in color or detail, but in feeling. He could feel every scream, every silence, every plea leaking from civilizations trying to make sense of a storm older than their gods. The frequency entered. "They're sending a child next." He looked up. "Child?" "A girl. No weapons, no lies, just questions." He was silent for a moment. "Let her come." Her name was Lion, small, soft-spoken, from a farming moon in the Edge systems. She carried a notebook, no datapads. She sat cross-legged at the foot of the great structure, looking up at the Prime when he came. "You're real," she said. He nodded. "I thought you'd be monsters." He waited. "But you're not." Still, he didn't speak. She scribbled something in her notebook. "They say you hate us." "I don't," he finally said. "Then why won't you stop?" He looked into her eyes. "Because we never started." She frowned. "I don't understand." "I know." She looked around. "Are you going to kill everyone?" He sighed, closed his eyes. For the first time, he looked tired. "I don't know." She hesitated, then asked, "Why did you come back?" He stared at her. "We never left." Across the stars, life went on, but colder now, quieter. No music on the pleasure moons, no fireworks on anniversary days. Churches were full, Bars were full, but nobody smiled. Every species felt it. The air was different. The night felt watched. People double-checked doors, locked ships tighter, taught their children old names, not of heroes, but of humans, so that when they came, maybe their names would be remembered too. But deep down, everyone knew. There was no stopping this. There was only waiting. And maybe accepting. There was a name once, not Prime, not the frequency. Before the silence, before the bones turned into monuments, before fear wore a human face. His name was Rhett. He had a family, a squad, a war. Not the kind with spaceships or plasma rifles. Something uglier, closer. The war that made him, the war against him. It wasn't fought for territory. It was fought for one reason, because humanity refused to die when it was told. They were the last to evolve, the last to unify, the last to develop faster than light travel. And when they finally stepped into the stars, what did they find? A galaxy that had already decided they didn't belong. The first human ambassador was murdered in open session on the floor of the Solarian Council. His body was broadcast across 100 worlds as a warning. Your kind was not invited. You have no place among the stars. Humanity responded with patience, with offers, with peace. They were denied entry to the Orion trade lines. Their colonies were sanctioned. Their children were sterilized by viral drift accidents. Their scientists were blacklisted. Their emissaries disappeared. The message was clear: stay in your corner, obey or vanish. But humans? Humans don't break that easy. They bent, they bled, and then they built. They built faster than light ships without shared tech. They built weapons that burned in silence. They built bodies that could walk through atmospheres made of acid and sleep in radiation storms. They didn't become monsters. They became proof. Proof that the galaxy's hierarchy, the entire cosmic lie, was built on fear and timing. Humanity wasn't inferior. They were just late, and that made them dangerous. Because what happens when the runt of the litter starts fighting back? They don't fight to win. They fight like they've got nothing left to lose. Rhett was there for the first retaliation, not a war, a message. He watched a human battalion drop onto a world that had auctioned off Earth's moon like it was salvage. Not to destroy it, just to erase the arrogance behind the act. No prisoners. No speeches, no scorched earth. Just a message carved into the Capitol wall in 17 languages. You will not bury us again. Rhett watched the galactic powers shift overnight. Their fear grew louder than their firepower, so they stopped fighting openly and started plotting. It wasn't just war they wanted anymore. It was extinction. But they couldn't kill humanity directly. Too many victories, too many survivors, too much resilience. So they tried something else, something more sinister. The truth was never in the war logs. It was buried in a structure no longer listed in any archive, a vault on the neutral moon of Rin Kel, where 25 species met in secret. The meeting lasted 8 days. It was called the Covenant of Stillness. No one was allowed to record it. Everyone who attended swore blood oaths of silence. But the humans had infiltrators. Always did. They left their own message in a forgotten language encoded in neural patterns. Rhett found it. He read it, and that's when he understood. They didn't kill humanity because they couldn't. They didn't fight fair because they didn't believe humans could be reasoned with. They used something far worse: unity. They offered peace, offered a truce, offered asylum, said, "We misunderstood you," said, "Let's start over." They gave humans one planet, one sector, one chance to heal, and humanity took it. Because they still wanted peace, they still believed in coexistence. So they built the cradle, a construct designed by both human and alien engineers, a place for memory, for growth, for rest. And while humanity slept, the rest of the galaxy erased them, not with bombs, with history, with bureaucracy. Books vanished, digital records corrupted, monuments crumbled. Children taught that humans were myths, nightmares to keep colonies obedient. But the cradle still held them, still beating, still dreaming, because humans didn't enter cryosleep. They didn't freeze themselves. They locked themselves away, by choice. They knew what was coming. They knew the betrayal would arrive. So they prepared, not to fight back, but to wait. Wait for a moment. A crack, one act of arrogance, one fool willing to open a door he didn't understand. And when that day came, they wouldn't need ships, or diplomacy, or armies. They would just need to wake up. Now Rhett stood in the Chamber of Remembrance, where his name once burned across banners. Not Prime, but Commander Rhett Andros, leader of the Last Wall, bearer of the Threshold Directive. He placed his hand on a slab carved with the names of the last 25 human children born before the cradle sealed. He remembered every one of them. He remembered why they slept. Not to survive, but to become something the galaxy couldn't unmake. He felt the others stirring behind him. They had questions now. They wanted direction. He was their leader, but he wasn't a king. He wasn't a god. He was the one who made the decision to end humanity's presence, so it could one day return. The cost of that silence had been everything. And now? Now the galaxy wanted answers. Too late. On the High Council of the Clarathi Combine, an old general named Tun Rak whispered the words none of them wanted to say. They buried themselves so they could rise later, not out of vengeance, but out of clarity. He looked around. The silence wasn't weakness, it was timing. We called it peace, but it was a countdown. No one spoke. Then the war priestess slammed her staff into the floor. So what now? Now, he whispered. Now we pray they haven't changed too much. Because if they have, we don't have a galaxy anymore. Back in Sector 0, Rhett stood above the chamber where the last 100 humans were still sealed. Not because they were dangerous. Because they were unfinished. Experiments, evolutions, concepts wrapped in flesh. He looked to the frequency. You ready? She nodded. For what? He stared out at the stars, where more fleets were beginning to form, more broadcasts, more lies dressed as diplomacy. He didn't smile. Truth? Across the galaxy, screens lit up again, not from alien signals, from a voice they hadn't heard in generations, a human voice. We never wanted a throne. We never wanted revenge. We wanted room to breathe. But you poisoned the air. You burned the bridges. You fed your people the lie of unity while building your empires on our erased names. So now, we give you clarity. Not war. Not peace. Just memory. And then the stars began to change. Not visually, not in data, in feeling. People across the galaxy felt weight press into their minds. Old guilt, old sins, things they didn't even know they remembered. The truth wasn't told, it was injected. Every species that had voted for humanity's erasure, every soldier who carried it out, every family that benefited from their silence. They remembered, and for many, it was the last thing they'd ever feel. The first monument fell on the 9th day. It wasn't destroyed. It was forgotten. Not like a glitch, not some viral wipe or memory bomb, just gone. Across the central world of Vel Shah, the towering arch of unity, a sacred, 1,000-meter-high structure made of quantum stone and immortal iron, was no longer there. Not rubble, not ruin, just absence. No one remembered building it. No one remembered why it mattered. Not even the statues that stood beneath its shadow remembered standing beneath anything. It had been rewritten, erased not just from stone, but from relevance. And that was only the beginning. Rhett, once just a soldier, now Prime, stood on the edge of a spiraling observation bridge shaped from folded memory strands. Beneath his feet, neural webs hummed with life, feeding thought into reconstructed systems not seen since the first silence. The frequency stood beside him. She no longer needed to speak aloud. Her presence pulsed across everything, every step, every breath, every hum of regret from the farthest galaxies. Behind them, 100 more humans were awake. Not soldiers, not generals, archivists. Humans trained for one specific purpose, not to fight wars, but to break meaning. They weren't here to kill. They were here to take back history. It began on a world called Cern Talos, a birthplace of the Graxi Empire, the oldest known interstellar civilization. Its capital museum contained artifacts dating back 1,000,000 years. Scrolls, art, bones, holograms of battles fought and won long before humans ever crawled out of Earth's dirt. Within seconds, the entire museum simply shifted. The artifacts were still there, the walls still stood, but the plaques had changed. No longer did they say, "Victories over the Terran incursion." Now they read, "Massacre of the innocent." No honor in erasure. Human silence, the price of false peace. And the worst part? Everyone believed it, even the Graxi. They couldn't remember writing it, but they believed it. Even their ancestors' victories now tasted like ash. The galaxy had always depended on narrative. Empires were justified by bloodlines, legitimacy passed down through memorials. Religion clung to events frozen in stone. Humans didn't just start erasing those stories, they rewrote them. Not with weapons, with truth. Buried, poisoned, twisted truths carved into galactic consciousness through stolen data cores, hacked archives, recovered journals from commanders who once wore Earth's ashes as medals. They didn't send invasions. They sent memory viruses, packets of guilt injected directly into cultural nerve centers, libraries, shrines, political archives, children's textbooks. In days, 27 species began to fracture internally. Civil wars, denunciations, riots at universities, mass suicides among truth keepers. It wasn't terror, it was clarity. And clarity was worse. The Krell Dominion fell first. Their supreme ruler, High Executor Trask, was assassinated by his own bloodline after recovered footage showed him standing above a pit of enslaved human children 2 centuries ago. They didn't know that footage existed. Neither did Trask. But the humans did. They always did. Because they remember everything. The cradle hadn't just preserved bodies, it preserved rage, recorded in skin, written in brainstem code, carried forward like a cursed heirloom from ancestor to ancestor. Every moment of betrayal, sealed into DNA, waiting to bloom like a virus, not to kill, but to restore balance. Rhett watched the chaos unfold in silence, not with pleasure, not with sadness, just stillness. He hadn't picked this path. He'd only lit the fuse, but someone else had poured the fuel long ago. He turned as a young human approached him, Elon, one of the newly awakened. 17. Skin pale from stasis, eyes haunted before they'd even opened. "Is it true?" Elon asked. "What we're doing to them?" "Yes. We're making them forget who they are?" "No," Rhett said. "We're making them remember who we are." "But what if they beg again?" "They already did." "And?" Rhett's jaw tightened. "It's not about punishment. Then what's it about? He looked the boy in the eyes. Justice doesn't always look like justice to the ones who survived the lie. On the moon, Yelther's cradle, a gathering of 10,000 species, called the Final Accord, met in emergency council. It was broadcast across every quadrant. The speeches were desperate. They promised reparations. They offered resources. They cried on behalf of ancestors who were long dead. One even offered Earth back, rebuilt and purified, as if giving back a corpse after the funeral. And then Rhett appeared. Not in person, as a projection, no fanfare, no threats, just him. In silence, they asked him to speak. He did. But he didn't deliver ultimatums. He told a story of a little girl named Erin, burned alive in a pleasure camp for being born human, of a father who carved her name into his arms for 40 years so it would never be lost to the erasure, of an empire that laughed while it happened. No accusations, no demands, just facts. And then, your children now grow up on stories of a galaxy where humans never mattered. We grow up knowing we were erased. You gave your descendants comfort. We gave ours truth. He looked at the cameras. This was never about peace. It was about pretending, and we don't pretend anymore. The feed cut. No threats, no violence, no invasion, but across the galaxy, children cried in their sleep, waking from dreams of ash and screaming faces they'd never been told about before. Because now they remembered too. The last hope of the galactic elite was the Hall of Eternity, a databank wrapped in stasis fields on the artificial ring world of Auric Vale, containing the preserved genetic histories of over 6,000 species, including the edited version of Earth's lineage. The humans didn't destroy it. They simply corrected it. One line of code, one data string, the record updated in real time. Suddenly, humans weren't Category 9, primate-based anomaly. They were Category 0, original blueprint. The core algorithm adjusted everything based on that, and the effect was biblical. Species across the stars woke up to find their ancestry redefined. Every history book, every genetic scan, every religious origin story now ended with humanity, and it broke them. On the refugee planet Wolnari 3, a former commander named Vex knelt at a graveyard of soldiers he'd once led into the human extermination zones. He dug his own hole beside them. No weapon, no audience. He carved one sentence into a stone before cutting his own throat. "We didn't just erase them, we erased ourselves." Rhett stood in the center of the cradle. Only one chamber remained sealed now, the core. Inside were the firstborn, not the oldest, the first reborn. Humans who had been modified beyond recognition, not physically, but mentally. Souls restructured by science and war. The ones even the cradle had feared waking too early. He reached for the seal, but the frequency stopped him. "Not yet," he nodded, his hand lowered. "I know," he whispered. "They're not ready." "Neither is the galaxy." She looked at him. "And neither are we." The cradle pulsed like a living thing. Inside, the last chamber waited. The core. The final lock. The piece of humanity the galaxy never saw, and never survived seeing. Not just rage, not just memory. Purpose. The frequency stood at Rhett's side, her form flickering as her voice faded into lower tones, like gravity folding in on itself. She had sung galaxies into tremble. But here, now, even she stood quiet. "You're sure?" she asked. Rhett stared at the seal. His hand hovered. "No," he whispered. She nodded. "Good." If he'd been certain, he wouldn't be human. Behind them, the last of their people stood watching. Not warriors, not kings, not gods, just the forgotten. Each one carrying a fragment of a story that had once been deleted, scrubbed, rewritten by cowards who couldn't stand the mirror. They had no flag, no anthem, no manifesto. They had only truth. And now, the galaxy knew it too. Across 10,000 systems, civilizations had stopped. Warships sat dead in orbit, untouched. Economies had collapsed, not from strikes, but from shame. Temples were burned not by enemies, but by their own believers, furious to learn their gods had been carved from genocide and rewritten to fit political theater. And children, the next generation, weren't playing soldier anymore. They were asking questions. Why did we lie about them? Why did we erase them? Why didn't they erase us back? That was the question no one could answer, because the humans could have burned everything. Instead, they burned the stories and left the living behind to choke on what remained. On Jarnex 5, the galactic broadcast grid blinked on, again. No warning, no preamble, just Rhett, in black, standing in the heart of the cradle. No smile, no banners, just finality. He spoke like a man who had waited too long to say something simple. You've seen what we can do, but you haven't seen what we won't. You called us monsters, savages, plagues. You made peace with our extinction. Built civilizations on top of our bones, and now you want to negotiate. He shook his head slowly. You don't negotiate with a grave. The core's seal cracked, but it didn't open. Instead, it breathed. The frequency looked at Rhett. They're awake, but not angry. No, she said softly. They're waiting. He nodded, because the worst thing humans ever learned wasn't how to survive war. It was how to survive guilt. Rhett turned his back to the core. He faced the others, the rest of his kind, those now awake and watching across the construct. Billions, all bearing different scars. He raised his voice, not in command, not in pride, but in burden. We're not here to rule. We're not here to return. We're not here to rebuild what they destroyed. He gestured to the void beyond the walls, to a galaxy on its knees. They have to live with it. We don't. Someone from the crowd, a boy, maybe 15, stepped forward. Then what do we do? Rhett looked at him, long and steady. We leave. Murmurs, not fear, just confusion. We gave them the truth, Rhett continued. That's all we ever wanted. That's more than they gave us. The difference is, we didn't ask them to love us. He looked back at the seal. We just made sure they'd never forget us again. On the planet Delaron, a mother tucked her child into bed. Her son clutched a small toy soldier, its face human, its body scarred. The name on the chest plate said Aaron. No one sold it, no one made it. It had appeared. The child whispered, I'm sorry. His mother blinked. What? I'm sorry we hurt them, the ones that left. She didn't answer. Because what do you say to a child who's apologizing for a world they didn't break? She just nodded and turned out the light. In the cradle, Rhett stood with the frequency. Where do we go? Does it matter? She asked. He shook his head. No. She took his hand. We'll go where the lies haven't reached. Across the galaxy, monuments to victory turned to ash, records updated, heroes recast as butchers, and new stories began, whispered in alleys, told around fire pits, written into songs by voices too young to understand the weight behind them. There was a time we buried something we didn't understand. It came back, and it left us behind. The cradle began to fold inward, not collapsing, not dying. Just departing. No hyperspace trail, no gravitational pull, no physical movement. It simply ceased to be part of this galaxy. It didn't vanish. It was remembered elsewhere, and every species knew what that meant. Humanity had left. But not because they forgave, because they chose not to be like us. One final message echoed through the galactic core. No video, no voice, just a line of text pulsing through every ship, every system, every planet. You had your time. You buried us to protect your comfort. Now you live in the shadow of what you did, not because we punished you, but because we let you survive it. And then, silence. Real silence. Not from fear, from completion. There was nothing left to fight, nothing left to ask for, nothing left to take back. The humans were gone, but not erased, not forgotten. Written into everything. A century later, a new generation would rise. Children who learned about humans not from lies, not from legends, but from the truth carved into the galaxy's skin. Some feared them, some honored them, some wanted to follow. But no one ever dared to wake them again.